Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel, and thanks for logging on. Today, we're looking at a Patek Philippe 5139G-010, white gold with a black lacquered dial and a stunning hobnail style bezel. You can see and you can purchase this micro-rotor automatic perpetual calendar on our website. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoy these videos, and please click on the card in the upper right hand corner of the screen at any time during this video to see our full sales listing for this watch with additional accessories included in the sale, high-resolution images for your desktop, and naturally complete pricing details for this Patek Philippe 5139G. Now, the watch on my wrist is traditionally sized. Since its inception for the 2008 model year, the 38mm 5139 has been a little bit of a connoisseur's piece, certainly not one of the mainstream perpetual calendar references. It's not one you tend to see on the wrist of the show-off who's looking to check the box. This is one that's a little bit curious in its combination of micro-rotor automatic, hobnail bezel, and straight vintage-style lugs. It's not a classic Calatrava case. Rather, it lands somewhere between the officer's watches and the classic Calatravas. Now, of course, on the wrist, it's compact at 38mm across the round of the case, not including the slim and somewhat countersunken crown. The watch is thin in profile, not ultra thin, 9mm thick. It'll clear any cuff though because of the step in the bezel. This is one to wear underneath dress sleeves. A dress watch par excellence. It's also wonderfully compatible with smaller wrists. At only 45.2mm lug-to-lug across the wrist, you could wear this watch easily on a wrist as small as 13 centimeters in circumference in my estimation. Now, there's a nice heft because of the precious metal, but this is going to be lighter than most integrated lug Calatravas simply because the lugs are so spare, but they are exquisite. As you can see, these are welded lugs. A tough way to make a case. You take two separate parts, the case and the lug, you weld them together, and then inside that soldered joint, you clear out by hand all of the excess material to leave that sharp cleft gap between them, that sharp crease line, to make them look like they remain separate structures even though permanently bonded. Tough to execute, also very old school in style. Now, you'll note the strap is a black medium-scale alligator leather, unbolstered, thin like the watch with a folded edge and a monotone stitch. The clasp is white gold, fully finished, inside and out. This is gray gold, to use the proper terminology. It's not white gold, which is generally rhodium or in cheap cases nickel-plated. This is a homogeneous alloy, like the case, that if scratched or scuffed only shows more white metal underneath. It never needs to be plated, and it is hypoallergenic. You'll also note the beautiful filigree-style Calatrava cross, the deployant giving you security against dropping or removing while donning at bedside. Now, the hobnail style of bezel is something that in the conventional Patek Philippe round watches dates to the early 1970s, and it's aged well, handsome and unconventional. It takes a look that we typically associate with dial guilloche and moves it to the exterior of the watch. It helps to add strength and definition to a timepiece that's simple in its lines but rich in its details. You can see the break between the case band and the vertical periphery of the bezel itself, and then that hobnail sweep is the barrier between the two. High polish is welcome on a watch with this dimension and proportion because it's elegant rather than garish. Now, you can see that there's a little bit of a domed profile to the sapphire. So again, vintage cues present in abundance, but the dial is rich and contemporary in its standards. All of the indices are appliques of white gold. The hands are of white gold, leaf style at center, and you can see that there is a gloss to the dial. It's a beautifully rich lacquer. It looks like permanently wet paint, so beautiful, almost as though you could plunge a finger into the depth of the paint bucket itself. A relatively discreet and simple Patek Philippe marquee signature at 12 o'clock, refreshing in this era of super graphics on watch dials. And if you look at it from the angle again, you can see that the sub-registers are countersunk to create another focal plane and separate them from the mass of the dial itself. Of course, you have months with coaxial leap year cycle indicator, and you have a 24-hour scale with coaxial day of the week. Now, the leap year, or I should say the danger zone, is a 24-hour format, so you know when it's, for instance, 6 a.m. or 6 p.m., 8 a.m. or 8 p.m., that is when not to set the perpetual calendar. A crescent-style moon phase at 6 o'clock with a radial date, turn it all over, and now you're looking at a automatic based on the caliber 240 micro rotor, which as of 2017 turned 40 years old, 40 years young, I should say. Originally launched in 1977, this remains the upscale Patek Philippe automatic, as the more basic automatic applications feature the 324 center rotor. The 240 and the micro rotor in general is reserved for prestige pieces, and this certainly qualifies. You'll note very thin. The advantage of the micro rotor is that it lets you have a watch that is manual watch thin with automatic winding convenience. It also removes the winding rotor at center as well as the winding bridge for the mechanism, therefore making the watch as visible from the case back as a manual. It's in the same plane as the bridges, so it obstructs nothing. Now you'll note a Gyromax style balance which is free sprung to resist bumps, disruptions, and inadvertent timing deviation from shock, and that is a Patek Philippe tradition dating back to the early 1950s. What you can't quite see is the telltale blue coil of the Spiromax silicon hairspring, a Patek Philippe innovation that endows this watch with robust anti-magnetic properties and a modern innovation of the mid to late 2000s. More material science underneath the classical 22-karat gold winding mass, ceramic rotor bearings, increasing the efficiency of the system and operating unlubricated. One less thing to worry about when your watch goes in for service, and one fewer source of dirt on the movement, a common problem with watches that feature exposed bearings in steel that have to be oiled. You'll also note the finish. Patek Philippe seal, because all of these built roughly after mid-2009 featured the Patek Philippe seal. No lack of quality. It's the same standard of execution you would have expected in the Geneva hallmark age. This is just Patek attempting to set itself apart with a signature, but the watch speaks for itself. You can see the richly textured Côte de Genève, not the stamped kind, and you'll also note the even and tight perlage pattern across the base plate. So that engine turning glorious beneath the balance as well as the rotor. The edge of every bridge, you can see to good effect here the gleaming edge. You really have to observe it under a loupe or a magnifying glass. Rounded, mirrored, and executed by hand. This is not the machine-executed CNC bandsaw angled slant that you see on mass-produced watches. Rounded, mirrored, done by hand. You'll also note as I move the watch through the light that the screws turn black, and that's because they are black polished, reflecting light in only one direction. That is the reason why the highest standard of optical polish is nicknamed poly noir. And you can also see from this angle to good effect the edges of those bridges and the balance cock beaming with that mirrored anglage. 38 to 48 hours of power reserve. The balance beats weight a stately 21,600 vibrations per hour. The timepiece can be seen and owned on our website.